Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of The New Standard. And no, I am not wearing a sports jacket, if you are wondering. With that, I want to welcome my guest and my co host, my partner in crime, to my left. What's up, Big Neal?
This might be blasphemous to say this upcoming Easter season, Lance, but I feel like I have returned from the dead over the last 5 days of pretty nasty illness. I don't know how good I sound, probably not the best. My voice is not in the best shape, but you know what? I'm not missing this either. It's the new standard. It's on right now. We've got Steelers stuff to talk about. There are a lot of things that happened, some key pivotal things that perhaps we overlooked in terms of positions we thought the team would hit in free agency. The roles for those players might have been discussed a little bit here and there, but there's a lot to dive into. And we are, 3 weeks out from the draft. So we're really heating up. This is a great show for everybody to tune into, and I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you everybody for chiming in. As always, if you want to find the show, go to YouTube, do a search for The New Standard. You can also go to a podcast feeder or reader and do a search for The New Standard. And when you're on YouTube, do the search for The New Standard and Lance Williams and or Neal Coulong. Make sure you like and subscribe to the program. Also been doing a lot of shorts. Check those out as well. But we need your support, especially as the draft is coming up. Make sure you like and subscribe to the program. Let's jump into, because we didn't I did an emergency show, a real quick show last week, but I wasn't able to get your thoughts on the latest transactions from the Steelers, the signing of Keanu, Neal, uh Ray Vick. We're gonna call him Ray Vick. That's just the inside joke. My friends know that joke. And Brendan Fehoko. We're going to talk about those two players. Get your thoughts, Neal. I gave a few thoughts on Neal. Looks like he's going to be a sub package player, maybe that Morgan Burnett type. We won't say that other name because in this Easter week, that other name is blasphemous. Rhymes with Ark, ends with Aaron. Um, so we won't say that name. But give me your thoughts on those two players that they signed, their role. What you think the thinking behind signing those players was?
Big plus for Breiden Fehoko. Very much a Steelers type of defensive lineman. He's technically sound. He's got good feet. He's going to play that A gap as well as they've had it played the last couple of years. He is the quintessential um, defensive lineman that they'll pick up on the cheap in free agency. It's important because they've been doing this for years. It just kind of shows they're looking to continue to emphasize versatility, but they need that front man. They need that middle of the line anchor run defender. And I think that's what Fehoko is. To put it into common nomenclature, I think he is a Tyson Alualu from 5 years ago. That kind of player. I feel like he can have that kind of impact. Real tough against zone running, which is really kind of a big thing across the NFL right now. He's not going to play 40, 50 snaps a game, I wouldn't think. I don't think he's going to be a 3-down player, but an excellent rotational piece that, as we've talked about many times, Lance, this is modern defense. You have to have versatility. You have to have multiple big and light sub packages, and Fehoko is the kind of guy that's going to be in on big packages, short yardage, running downs, and he's going to make an impact. He can control that gap. You see him doing a lot of things, stunting in and around, which is what the Steelers do a lot of. A well-coached player and technically sound player. An excellent pickup, in my opinion. I think that's going to be great.
Let me ask you real quick, as you talk about him, um, talk about how, just really briefly, how the Steelers deploy that position. Do you think he's going to be a one gap, two gap guy? Briefly talk about that.
I think they're not going to do a whole lot of two gap from that position. I wouldn't think. They haven't, we should say, unless you're putting Cam Hayward inside. I don't think they're going to do a whole lot of that out of that position. But the strong side of it, especially against zone. It's what is critically important. If that's his gap, it's getting across the center's face, making sure that you are in front of the zone blocking that they're instituting, that they often are instituting now, and being able to force that early cutback right into the teeth of your defense. If you are the nose tackle in that front, and let's just say the play, it's a zone run to the right side. If he's out in front of the center, cutting off that lane, the strength is going to be behind you. Your weak side linebacker becomes your backside force, and they're the one that is not going to have a whole lot of contest between himself where he is at the start of the play and the line of scrimmage. So if you can control the forward motion of the running back. In other words, if you think of him as running diagonally and his lane is getting shorter because the nose tackle is over across the center can't control that lane anymore. He's going to have to cut back earlier. And where he's going to cut back is exactly where the weak side linebacker is going to be. And that play typically isn't going to go for much. Very important for the nose tackle to win leverage on those plays. And when they don't, that's when you see big plays happen. That's when you see a running back get to the wall and be able to cut back for through an open lane that the defenders aren't covering at that point. The further stretched you get, the harder it is to maintain gap integrity. He's the type of player that can control the middle and force that earlier cutback and not allow the running back to have multiple options to choose from. It solidifies the rest of your defense, and it's the easiest lane in which to run through, inside or outside zone. A big part of this is why you want an active center, a fast center off the snap. And the reason I bring that up is just to put the parallel in place. The Steelers could not do that at all when Kendrick Green was their center, because Kendrick Green could not get off the snap and into a block. It's the reason why he didn't snap a ball again after last season, and won't presumably again in the NFL unless something terrible goes wrong for somebody else. Fehoko is the type of player who can beat good centers in the NFL. Some of the clips that I saw was him against Ben Jones, who's a very solid, long-standing pro center for the Tennessee Titans. They did a really good job. Los Angeles did of shutting down Derrick Henry in the game that I had seen. It was brought up by Brian Baldinger.
Baldy, yeah, that's my guy.
You saw multiple reps from Fehoko in that, beating Jones, who's an undersized but very quick, very agile, technically supreme center. And Fehoko was beating him to the punch repeatedly, and they couldn't get Henry to a point where he had a solid option of lanes to choose from. He had one way to go, and that was to the backside of Fehoko, and the linebacker has him, or the safety, or whoever has him dead to rights in the middle of the field. And with a guy like Henry, you need 2-3 guys to tackle him. That was the key to their defense, and he did a great job in that game. That's the kind of thing that the Steelers are paying him to execute. And I think he's going to be solid in that role, perhaps better than what they've seen. They haven't gotten, Tyson Alualu's career is over. I said that last year. He's not going to continue to perform at the level that he had. Hats off to him. Great player, but he obviously isn't coming back, certainly not now. It puts Montravius Adams on notice. I wonder what they're going to do with that, if that's a rotational thing between the two. An interesting battle to watch. You don't necessarily look to get rid of either one of them that you just signed, but you have to think Adams would be the odd man out if that's how they want to set that up, and that's going to depend on what they do in this draft. But an excellent interior defensive lineman addition for the Steelers. Very excited for what he's going to be able to do.
Talk about Neal, your namesake. You know that's going to happen to you, Neal, this year. Everybody's going to think you're a Steeler. Neal.
No, what sucks about that is we had Evan Neal, the dominant Alabama offensive tackle. I'm thinking that's where it is. All right, good. This guy's going to be a Pro Bowl level player. I like this. The thought in my head, I had this conversation with somebody. I'm not even making this up. It always was, my biggest fear is the Steelers are going to sign Keanu Neal to play that Mark Barron role, that Morgan Burnett role, that role the Steelers have tried repeatedly to make work, that dime backer, converted safety,
right.
Looking to get inside largely man short area coverage out of a guy that his coverage days are long gone. That's exactly what they signed with Keanu Neal. So frustrating in that regard. Somebody can help me out. Somebody who's probably more well versed in hockey than I am. The Pens had a guy. Last name was Neal. Anytime that he did anything, it was great to say, "Yep, Neal's the best." Easy, cheap dad joke like retweet that I could put out. It's going to be savage for Neal's everywhere this year. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in that. I hope they don't. They aren't planning to deploy Keanu in the types of ways that they thought Mark Barron was going to be able to do. He became target practice for opposing offenses.
Neal only played when I took a look at and I thought I had it written down. Neal played maybe about 400 snaps roughly, and anywhere in that range. It was definitely under 500 snaps. He definitely is a sub package guy. You could definitely you could see that, definitely with his snap counts. And I believe when I looked at some of his grades from PFF, what you say really stands out, that his coverage grades were really inconsistent. Uh, Good tackling grades, good pressure grades. That box maybe a little bit of a thumper, a little bit, but definitely it was weird to see your comments that you sent me in text and see how when you looked at him graded out, that was absolutely evident in his grade when you looked at it. So it was kind of funny that those matched up perfectly.
A lot of
But
that came from a big fan of the show, Luke Easterling, who's now with me over at Athlon Sports, by the way. Please check that out, athlonsports.com. He was in Tampa watching Neal. He was in Tampa watching Barron. He's got a pretty good idea how these things work out. And he said very much in line with what PFF had said. His coverage game is not there. It's not going to be consistent. If you want him in run support, he's a body. He can handle that. But what you're asking those guys to do now, it's painful. If you're in a dime situation and one of your linebackers is going to be a converted safety isn't going. Minka Fitzpatrick can match up pretty well probably on slot receivers or split tight ends because he's Minka Fitzpatrick. He's an elite player. Otherwise, there's a reason they're a safety or a linebacker and not a cornerback. So you're asking a lot from them already, but then add in the wear and tear that a guy like Neal has. It's a recipe for disaster. This is me. I understand strategically the logic behind trying to get this role to work. I just don't see the implementation having ever worked for this team. The closest I think they've come is Trey Norwood. He's the guy who's there, and I would hope has probably a higher priority in terms of assignment than Keanu Neal would. I don't know. We'll see how it turns out. But if they've got to put a sixth defensive back on the field like that, and it's Keanu Neal, doesn't exactly take, Aaron Rodgers to see where Keanu Neal is on the field and go at him right away. It seems. He gave up. He gave up like 85% completions or something like that.
It was
barely even competed. They know he's there. They're going to throw at him, and you're inviting them to do that. Some might argue that's a strategy. If you have him in short, if you want your guy to beat him short on 3rd and 7, hopefully you can come up with a tackle. Concede the catch, get the tackle in the open field. It's a kind of a pessimistic outlook, but I can see some strategy in that. But I sincerely hope that's not what they're planning on rolling with.
Yeah, so let me ask you this before we jump into the question of the program, which is make your case for drafting a cornerback in the first round. Of their transactions and their free agent moves, which move? And let's talk about one real quick before I ask you this question. Bud came, Bud was seen, Bud left. Is the Bud Dupree Steeler Nation all of a sudden he's a great player when he wants to come back? Excitement gone. You think we're going to see Bud Dupree return as a member of the Black and Gold?
Maybe Bud had other things to do. Maybe he had some family stuff going on. Maybe
He was getting a Woolies. He was getting a
he's
fish
got his
sandwich.
own kid on spring break. He's got he didn't have time to sign a contract. My bet, and we won't know this, but my bet is they brought him in. Maybe the doctors checked him out. He's not fully recovered from the injuries that he had, possible surgery in the offseason. These are things that we can only speculate about. They won't speak to it now for sure. There's no reason for them to do that. I don't know this. I am speculating. I think that there is some probability. There's a decent chance he had some type of procedure in the off season and he's not back from that yet. And they're not going to sign him until he can check out fully. They don't need to sign him today. I don't think he's up against anything. And this was probably a time that was most convenient for everybody for him to meet. Keep in mind, they've got a draft coming up still. After that, it's rookie minicamp. Then it's the team's minicamp. After that is kind of the second age of free agency. And it seemed like Bud was destined for that time period anyway, just considering the injuries that he's had. Make sure he is fully healthy and ready to be able to contribute. They don't need to sign him today. I would imagine there's mutual interest on both sides. I think they could use him, and I think Dupree would be in a good spot in Pittsburgh. He knows exactly what he's getting. He knows what his role is. It's pretty obvious that would be the role. He wouldn't have talked to the team at all if he wasn't interested. So I think both sides have interest in doing business together, and it's if that's the case, it's likely he has some type of medical concern that they want to allow to heal and some time to kind of rehab a little bit before signing him. So just my guess. I don't think it's over. I think they just got a meeting that they wanted to have out of the way now, and see how it goes. Maybe he hasn't had the procedure yet. Bud wants to find a team first that's going to be okay with him having it in the off season. Maybe that's what the conversation is. A lot of times it's a situation like that. It doesn't mean that he's less of a player. It just means that he probably isn't going to have a market anywhere until he's recovered from whatever it happens to be, and they can take a shot at him again come June.
Speaking of that, I think you make some solid points because given the need of pass rush and coverage in the National Football League, if you almost have a pulse and you can get to the quarterback and have showed at some point in time you can get to the quarterback, you're going to get a look, you're going to get a sniff, you're probably going to be on a roster. And I bet you're probably dead on that there's some injury concern about Bud by the league. And so, with the draft coming up, you don't have to rush. You can kind of wait. And if it's an injury concern, you can wait. You have time to wait for him to get healthy. And to your point about Neal and his coverage stats, he gave up 22 receptions and he was targeted 27 times. The catch percentage is 81.5, and the passer rating that he gave up in coverage was 132.8. I mean, that's damn near
What are the
perfection.
yards per catch? That's
the
the
yards
key
per
thing here.
catch. Let me get to yards per catch. I
If
think
he's
it's
covering
around
short, they're going to complete the pass to a high degree, and that's going to help bump the rating up.
12.9
Okay,
is the coverage.
So you call it 13 yards a catch.
I don't want to cheat him. It's 12.9.
12.9 a catch that's a long catch,
And big up Double H.
Just to break into this as well, this was just tweeted by Iri Myrov. The Steelers signed veteran safety Keanu Neal to a 2-year, $4.25 million contract. Oh boy. That seems high to me. We'll see how it's structured, but my guess would be maybe call it 2 for year one. It's probably fair. I don't think counting on a second year is a good idea. The Steelers don't typically sign players to 2-year deals that they absolutely want to have for 2 years, they'd sign him for 3 if they needed him for the next 2 seasons. Just ask Miles Jack. He signed a pretty big 2-year contract last year, got one of those 2 years. So I think I'm not a fan of Keanu Neal. I don't like the role he's going to play.
Maybe
That's just
they
me.
maybe
I
they
hope he
see
does well. It's
something.
not significant. It just vet minimum is for him is about $1 million a year. That's all I'm saying. So
You know,
we'll see how that turns out.
you know how it works, Neil. They see something.
All right.
There's something in him that they think they can see. Well, let
They
me ask
see
you this
something that
before.
nobody else sees. It's
That
comforting.
always works. Actually, and that's interesting that you say that. One thing I wanted to say about the Bud Dupree uh, flirtation is that Steeler Nation is hilarious because now that the Steelers have somewhat flirted with Bud, Bud is going to be much better coming back than what he was when he was with the Steelers. So for the 4 to 5 years that Steeler fans complained about the lack of production from Bud, all of a sudden that's going to
No,
get
he's great.
washed away because Bud wants to come back. So you know how that works. But
It's a
what,
nostalgic bunch.
yeah, you know how that works. What's the most exciting signing so far? What do you think is the most exciting or most pivotal move? Exciting, however you want to frame it for yourself in this free agent period. What's the most exciting one for you?
I think it has to be Peterson. Um, I don't think any of these guys are significant difference makers. They weren't signed to be that either. Their contracts are not significant. Um, add in the linebacker. Between those two, I think those are the headliners of this group. Last year, I think might have been a little bit more fancy, if you will, but good, solid production out of Cole. I think with him, you'll get um, consistency. It's some pretty good run support. I think that there's some decent A gap blitzing opportunity with him. Like a lot of inside linebackers that are available in free agency, he's probably not all that great in coverage. It's a tough thing to do, but look, this is the defense you set up. You fairly spent a ton of money on the edge, and you spent a ton of money with the best center fielder in the game. So you have to figure everything else out for perhaps less than market in some cases. I like Peterson in the sense that he provides in their kind of flexible scheme, he can play different roles in different situations. He doesn't have to be just in one place or off the field. Mike Tomlin hinted as much. He's going to be moved around a bit, perhaps playing the quote unquote safety position, whatever you want to even call that anymore, in certain situations. I think that fits his skill set where he is as a player right now pretty well. I think he can be productive here. I don't think he's going to be a legitimate high-level Pro Bowl player. I mean, with the intelligence and experience that he has with Minkah Fitzpatrick playing behind him, I'm interested to see how that meshes, how successful teams are attacking a cover 3 look on Peterson's side with Minkah over there. I would expect the two of them to play off of each other very well. And that's defense. It's not pure just man coverage all the time. You have to leverage the scheme that you're in and your teammates. And that's a huge thing. This is the real value of Minkah Fitzpatrick. He can take the top away from an opposing offense, not let them find that deeper space over perhaps the physically declining cornerback on the outside. Minkah can cover a lot of ground. He's very smart. He knows what he's doing. That makes a guy like Peterson better. But if Peterson can handle underneath to some degree, and tail, playing a bail technique, I think they could create more turnovers that way. If teams want to dare try to throw in between the two of them, that's a valuable thing. Holcomb, simply put, is probably better than Miles Jack last year, and he's definitely better than Devin Bush. So there's some possible thought of improvement within that unit. next year, although I wouldn't say that Jack was terrible. Just a pretty one-dimensional player. You're getting a better athlete at this point in his career for less money now in Cole Holcomb. You have to like that. Landon Roberts, is he going to be the other starter? I don't know. We have a draft yet to go. Could be a depth signing, which makes sense. They would have needed to add another one anyway. Not incredibly exciting. We'll see what happens with him.
I, I
Who
think
else
I'm
is there?
I think I'm most excited about Siamalo. I
Yeah, I
like
forgot about him.
I'm most excited, I think, about Siamalo, about hopefully the stability that he can bring to that offensive line, particularly with a young signal caller in Kenny Pickett. I think they need to fortify the trenches, and I think they've done a very good job. Hopefully, they've done a very good job over the last 2 years with Cole Daniels and Siamalo. I think that gives them, we'll have to see how it plays out, but I think the interior of their offensive line has a potential of being as good as it was when DeCastro and Foster were rolling. And so I think you have to like that. And we'll talk about it at some point, probably next week when we do a make your case for offensive tackle. But I like the fact that they've addressed the trenches and they're trying to upgrade and get better on the offensive line. But let's switch reels to the main topic of the show, and that's called Make Your Case as we get closer to the draft. And the name of this episode is Make Your Case for Signing a Cornerback in the first round. And so, Neal, I want you to speak to that question as well, but also to a couple of my points of why I think, or I'm making the case that the Steelers should sign a cornerback in the first round. So let me give you my first stat. And as I go through these, speak to these. Uh, Too many explosive plays in the passing game. The Steelers, as a defense, were tied for 26th worst. They gave up 7.0 yards per attempt, which ranked 26th worst in the National Football League. That's my first reason why I'm making my case for them to sign a corner or a safety in the first round, but more specifically a corner. Your thoughts?
Yes. there are multiple reasons to go with this. For me, the first thing I would look at would be the roster construction, the way it's set up right now. Patrick Peterson in 2024 will be 34 years old with a base salary of $3.85 million and a roster bonus of $3 million. That's tough. He also is one of two cornerbacks who are signed for next season. They don't have any players. Witherspoon is a free agent next year. Arthur Mollett is a free agent next season. Levi Wallace is a free agent next season. James Pierre, I don't think we mentioned, they did bring James Pierre back. He is a free agent. They don't have any cornerbacks. So to be honest, it is without question the most glaring position that they need to address in this draft. To put it mildly, they're drafting a cornerback. Okay, there is no way they're getting out of this draft without a cornerback. They need a cornerback, though, that can be the dude by next season, if not this season. That's not even out of the question. So, it kind of tells you you probably want to invest an early pick in that player, because you can't have a guy who's not going to be signed next season. You can't go with the undrafted rookie. It's a premium year for cornerback, in my opinion. I think it. I'm not going to guarantee that it's 17 overall, but I don't see any way in the world one of their first 3 picks is not a cornerback. So that's playing it safe. The best bet, in my opinion, all things considered, for the Steelers' 17th overall pick is going to be a cornerback, because they don't have any next year, and they literally could have none on the roster by the end of the season if they don't draft one. So by the end of this season, they might not have any players who were signed for 2024 if they don't draft one. They have to draft, they might even argue they might need to draft two, which isn't common for anybody really to do. But they definitely need to find a starting caliber corner early in this draft.
Here's another from a statistical side, and I think that's a solid point. I mean, you don't have any. I don't know how more like obvious like that,
It's pretty
like
simple.
like you
Unless
you
they're doing
you
away with the position, which I don't think they are.
you don't have any. Let me give you a couple other stats here. The Steelers tied for 30th in the National Football League, meaning worst. Um, 11.4 yards per completion.
Jeez.
And they ranked 31st in touchdown passes allowed. They gave up 29 TD passes. And ironically, the ratio, the plus minus in terms of TD passes is alarming. And that might be your reason for drafting a wide receiver in the first round is they gave up 29 touchdown passes and they had
They didn't
12
score.
touchdown passes as an offense. I
He
mean,
gave
that's just
141 targets to a guy
I
who didn't
mean,
score a
that didn't
touchdown.
score. I mean, that's so
It's
that
impossible. Oh,
I mean
that is
that
hilarious.
so those are my reasons. Also, they play a lot of cover one. Um, and so you're going to need a corner that can actually cover. And because in cover one, you're going to be in a lot of man. You're going to be in man coverage, a ton in cover one, and they play a lot of cover three. And so that they put a little more strain and onus on their corners to be able to play and be solid and to hold up. So those are my statistical reasons and why. And that's the case of why I think they will go at 17. That would be why I think they go to corner. Is there any reason you want to add to that, or is there any reason why you think they don't go corner, given the roster issues and given the fact that flat out they gave it up last year in the passing game?
They got dry humped up and down the field multiple times. I might argue those statistics, while valid, could be explained by the fact that they played some of the best offensive teams in the game. Cincinnati had their way with them in the second meeting of the two. Philadelphia and Buffalo put beatings on them that they won't forget anytime soon. Those are some pretty good offensive teams. Not making excuses. I'm just saying the shocking depth of that. In other words, look at the teams at the bottom of that statistic. I'll bet they played multiple of the best offensive teams in the game. Chicken versus egg in a lot of cases. But just for full disclosure's sake, Buffalo killed a lot of good cornerbacks this season. They're a really good offensive team. It's hard to stop an offense today. That's the way the NFL has built their product to be. No, I think we've covered it. I mean, they're these are all valid reasons. A reason that they don't, lack of availability. The situation they're in really strains the credibility of this kind of edict of the draft, but you have to draft for need, but the player you're taking needs to fit the spot you're taking him in. In other words, just because this guy's a cornerback doesn't mean you draft him at 17. He has to be worth the 17th overall pick. Otherwise, you get Jarvis Jones on your roster, who should have been a 6th round pick. If they paid attention to his complete lack of athleticism, they might have, clued into that. I don't know. We're not going to get into that now. Look, an odd thing, they signed technically 3 cornerbacks last offseason in bringing Mollett back, as well as Wallace and acquiring Witherspoon. So it's possible they might want to dip into free agency. You don't have a whole lot of guys signed with some good cap space for next season. Probably some moves that still need to be made. They'll be pretty open cap-wise next year if they really want to invest in veteran cornerbacks. I don't think that's a very good reason. But if we're looking for anything that we can do to suggest they might not, which I think is as sure a bet as there is in this draft, that might be it. They want to spend on some veterans next year, and the value didn't line up. among the premium spots this year. Even then, they're taking a cornerback. There's just no way. Will it be a premium guy? I don't know. They don't often invest premium picks into cornerbacks, so it's
Yeah, that's what I
possible.
was going to say as well. Is that
If we go by history, maybe.
yeah,
I think this is a year they might want to ignore that, though.
yeah, this is yeah, I was going to say that as well. That typically they don't go corner in the first. I think the last one was Artie Burns, friend of Steeler Nation,
And it was Chad Scott before that,
and it
back
was
in like
Chad Scott before
'97.
that. Typically, when you see teams not drafting a particular position in the first round, historically, it tends to be the way they deploy that position, the way they value the position. It doesn't necessarily warrant a first round selection. And also, at times, it's draft position that when you're very good, you're drafting late in the rounds and the high premium guys may be gone. So who you have available to you to draft may not either fit you, or you have another need that you want to address with your draft selection. So you might not get the best cornerback in the league at 30. And I would bet, and I may do a dive into it. It'd be interesting to see what the average draft grade is of all Pro Bowl corners. I would bet it's
You're
around
going to find it all over the
12.
board.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. That might be interesting. It might be no correlation there.
We can look into that. Let's double back on that. The argument I would put against what I just said is there are a lot of cornerbacks that play. I mean, really, it's a starting position. There are 3 cornerbacks for every team they're going to play often. So you can make the argument there are more opportunities, and there have been more Pro Bowl and All Pro slots open for the acknowledgement of that. Your slot corner. Um, Slot corners are not guys that are drafted high, but they're going to be Pro Bowlers. They're going to be all pros because they have that position.
Yeah.
So you're going to find a wide variance of however we want to define a high level cornerback, and the easiest way to do it, if not the less than ideal way, would be Pro Bowls and all pro selections.
Yeah, that's just easy.
There are a lot of very good cornerbacks who are taken in the middle to late rounds, though, across the NFL, and we know that. There just aren't very many high-end ones. It's a really hard position based on traditional grades and based on how slanted the game is toward offense. It's really hard to be a dominant, outstanding cornerback, certainly for a long period of time.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And make sure you like and subscribe to the program. Want to send a big shout out to Double H. Thank you for the contribution to the show, Double H. And if you guys want to be like Double H and contribute to the program, please hit the like and subscribe. And also, you can hit a donation to the program as well. Let's jump into Double H's question, Neal. Answer this for me. An interesting question to you both. What is the higher probability, trading up or trading down? I'm going to say the higher probability would be trading up. I don't think they're going to do it. I mean, we've seen them do it in the last several years. They've traded up to go after some guys. We remember, Devin Bush, of course. They've done it in the past.
That was great.
I thought they traded up for Troy Polamalu, right? They
did.
They famously did that. The Steelers tend to stand pat. So I would think that the highest probability is they stand pat at 17 and take the best player to address their most pressing need, and that they stay at 17.
If we're answering Mr. 2H's question, of those 2 options, I think it's trading up. They have a history that shows that they'll do that when the right opportunity exists. What they don't do is trade down. We don't see them doing that. You look at it in terms of roster building, what they have believed, and there's a new GM, but what they have believed typically is they have a first-round pick. They want to draft a first-round player. They don't necessarily put a huge amount of stock into adding more rookies to your roster who are not the prospect that the first round pick is. To trade out of the first round completely in that draft, it's unprecedented for the modern era. They haven't done that. Trading their first round pick and not having one has happened once. That was the Minka Fitzpatrick trade. That was an incredibly unique situation in which they were getting incredible value that didn't cost them anything immediately for a position they absolutely needed to have, and a player who was a game into his second year in the league. Huge value. Absolutely worth that pick. Absolutely worth that trade. If they get an offer like that, or a general management group that's stupid enough to make that deal the way Miami was, you have kind of an obligation to follow through with that. It doesn't happen all that often, though. That said, I don't see the real value for them in trading down. I think they just want to get the guy that's there for them at the board, where they're at. They don't mess around with that kind of thing. Kind of goes in the same line with the fact, I've mentioned this a couple times as well. The Steelers take approximately 2.5 seconds to turn their pick in to the commissioner when they're on the clock. And I think they're yelling at whoever's turning it in to run faster. They don't have any desire to waste time. This is what they want to do. They're not looking to play the what-if game. Trading it down for an extra third-round pick just might not seem of value to them because they budget not just the contract, but the coaching, the availability. Adding new players to your team does not necessarily suggest your team is better or worse. It does mean, though, that you've got more younger guys for a position coach that has to handle certain things. They've prepared to have this many picks, short of the Raiders are really stupid and want Martavis Bryant. We'll give you a third-round pick for him. Okay, we'll do that deal all day. Short of those situations, they don't tend to want to move with their first-round pick. Now, if somebody's going to say, we'll give you our next 2 first-round picks to swap from 17 to 20, I bet they would do that, but you're probably not going to get that offer either. If there's somebody they absolutely want, and I don't know if we have time for this, Lance, I'll keep it short. I know back in 2012, like most people would have figured, the Steelers, their biggest position of need was offensive guard, and they loved David DeCastro. They loved everything about him. They had a deal with the Jets set to move up from 24 to 16 for them to draft DeCastro. The Jets backed out of that deal because the Seahawks drafted West Virginia's Bruce Irvin at 15. Bruce Irvin was not supposed to go at 15. The Jets absolutely wanted to have a pass rusher in the first round. They felt they'd be happy with Irvin at 24, and they were confident he would fall to 24. So they were going to make the deal with the Steelers until the Seahawks took Irvin at 15. Jets backed out of it, took Quentin Copples at 16, and the Steelers had to wait to draft DeCastro at 24. He wasn't supposed to go at 24 either. So it goes to show that if the Steelers have a target, there is a guy they absolutely want. We've seen them go up and get that player, and that player tends to be somebody, with the exception of Devin Bush, of course, who is fairly remarkable to a Hall of Fame level player. Basically, Santonio Holmes through Troy Polamalu. They're moving up for good players. We've seen that. Then there's Devin Bush. But that's another argument for another day. I could. That said, I'm not sure this is the year for them to trade up simply because they need to protect their capital. They can't really give up anything. They need the picks they have. They have to bolster their depth a bit more. I don't think they'll trade up either, but they're not going to trade back to bolster that depth at the price of their first round spot where they are specifically in the first round. Never say never, but overall, the bet in my mind would be if they're going to do one or the other, it'd be move up.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you a question about the corners because Robert Cotting, and big up to Robert, big up to Kevin Motley, big up to Mel, big up to Felicia, big up to everybody that's jumped in. Do you want to speak? You want to jump into Robert's question? Let me know because we might dig into this a little bit later. And I want you to tease the program that we have with your friend coming up as well in this program.
Well, I don't know if I have that yet. I haven't heard back from him, but
Okay. So
I don't line players up against each other in a draft. It's kind of pointless. I'll say this: that Gonzalez kid from Oregon is really, really good. He's going to play for a while. Witherspoon is really good. The kid out of Illinois. The kid that what Lance was referring to from my buddy Thor Nystrom of Fantasy Pros. He sent Banks out of where was he? South Carolina.
I think so.
Maryland. I don't know why I confused those two, but Devontae Banks is a good player. I could see him being among the better ones when it's all said and done. But let's be honest, the elephant in the room here is Joey Porter Jr. You get mixed reads on him. There's a lot of value to him as a player. He's got a perfect build for the position. He's lanky. He's very athletic.
And his name is Joey Porter.
And then there's that. And to be honest with you, I don't know if Mike Tomlin would want to take him. I really don't. I've heard Tomlin say this, and I know from inside the team as well. They specifically had talked to Terrell Pryor before the supplemental draft when he was eligible. You might remember the Pittsburgh product that went to Ohio State.
Yes, from Clarion.
Got some tattoos and thrown out of school for that or whatever that nonsense was. The Steelers, Tomlin said, we're not sure if this is the best for you. You might want to get out of the city that you know, spread your wings a little bit. Now, I don't know if that's you got some troublemakers around you back home and you might not want to be here. We don't want to add to that. Or we don't necessarily feel making a premium high stakes investment in a young player who's from here is the right idea. You know, yes, obviously they've drafted Pitt players. I know for a fact Revis was the guy they were going to draft before the Jets traded ahead of them in 2007. They won't turn away a Pitt player. I'm not suggesting that at all. Anybody from Pittsburgh, they're not going to turn them away. But in this case, I wonder, considering who his dad is, considering he grew up here, Tomlin might think, I could see some wisdom behind the idea of there's just too much stuff that's not in his control for him to be in a position to succeed here. I could see that. That said, I think he's worth the 17th pick overall. Might be a little bit higher rated than that. In fact, I'd be surprised if he was on the board at that point, to be honest. I don't think he's better than the ones that I mentioned before, but I could definitely see him being the type of cornerback the Steelers would want to have. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's the guy that they would want. I don't think I don't know. For my money, I think he should go a bit higher than 17. That's just me. I think all four of those guys should. We'll see how that turns out. That's one counter I would say to the Steelers drafting at 17, a cornerback at 17 overall is, my opinion, it'll be the fifth best cornerback in the draft. Is that going to be a player who's worth 17 overall? It's a pretty remarkable class if that's the case. I'm not sure that option will be there. That said, it's not all that often you have that type of class. So maybe I'm wrong about a few of these guys in terms of what their fits would be with different teams. Maybe he would go lower. Porter, connecting the dots is really easy, and it's a game I hate playing. You know, if every reason in the world why you'd see the Steelers drafting Porter, it just seems so obvious that I don't know. I think he should go higher than 17. That's just me.
Like it feels so obvious that it isn't obvious. But let me give you the names of some guys that we're following in terms of their mocks that I need to look up this week and see if these guys have put out any new mock drafts. So Nate Tice has the Steelers taking Devin Witherspoon, cornerback from Illinois.
Nice
Doug
pick.
Farrar, friend of the program, has the Steelers taking Kelly Ringo, cornerback from Georgia. Luke Easterling, friend of the program, has Steelers taking JPJ, Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State, cornerback. Of course, we just talked about Thor. taking Deontay Banks from Maryland. Chris Trapasso has the Steelers taking Kalijah Cansey of Pittsburgh,
Good
defensive
guy.
lineman, and
He's a beast. I
and
love
Ryan
the
Wilson.
fact that Cansey's getting the love that he's getting. Huge pro day, very productive player. The fact that people are now putting him in the top half of the first round is pretty impressive.
I mean, his
Like him a lot.
RAS is out of this world. Uh, uh, and last but not least, in terms of the guys we're following, Ryan Wilson has the Steelers taking Brian Branch, safety out of Alabama. Before we get off the program, Neal, there was one thing I wanted to jump into, and I think I sent you the graphic a couple of times as we get ready to close out. I want you to do and maybe we'll. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Maybe we should dig into this, as a show. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it in the holster. I'm gonna keep it in the holster because it'll be a good topic, I think, for another show. Um, Let me take a look at these comments in the chat from James. Another cornerback from Maryland, not named Chad Scott or Scott Shields.
Just forgetting Sean Davis and all this. Come on.
Yeah, Sean Davis as well. Yeah,
The
Sean
other
Davis.
whipping boy from that class. They went cornerback and safety back-to-back picks, and you can get anything from either of them. Sean Davis was a marginal NFL safety. He's probably still better than Keanu Neal. So
wow,
got that going for us. That's gonna be
Ray
great.
Vic. Before we get out of here, I want to wish everybody a happy Easter and a happy Ramadan. It is and if you celebrate both, definitely, I want to wish you a happy one of each, and hopefully you spend some time with your families, and have a good week. Neal, you got anything else before we get out of here?
Nope, I'm just trying to recover here.
You sounded great this week.
Good.
And so next
if it
week,
helps, my voice is shot. I don't have anything left.
It sounds
not
deeper. Barry Neal. You sound Barry Whitish. Barry Neal.
Never been compared to Barry White before.
Right on.
Can't even try an impression.
Anyway, we're going to get on out of here. And next week, I think as we get, we're going to try to get a special guest on the program to jump into some draft stuff. But we're going to continue in the Make Your Case series next week. I think we're going to jump into Make Your Case for drafting a left tackle in the first round as we get closer to the draft. And of course, we're going to do, hopefully we'll be able to do it like we did last year. We'll do 3 shows every day of the draft. That's what we did last year, right? Mm-hmm. We did day 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, which was great. It worked out pretty great.
I barely remember the end of it. I think we were just like mumbling.
Yeah, exactly. Big up to you, Marcus J. But we're going to get out of here. And as always, please tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers.